Hello class, and welcome to the video lecture for corporations. Learning Unit 2 covers types of stock. Accounting for corporations is different than accounting for partnerships and sole proprietors in the treatment of the accounts in the owner's equity section of the balance sheet. The owner's equity section for a corporation, called the Statement of Stockholders' Equity, has two sections. One is called Paid-in Capital. This section represents what stockholders have invested in the corporation. The second is retained earnings. Retained earnings are the profits of the corporation, what the corporation has earned from operations. Make sure you understand the difference between these two sections. There's a quiz question about it. Here's an illustration of the two sections of stockholders' equity. The paid-in capital section includes a general ledger account called capital stock. Going forward, you'll learn about other general ledger accounts in that section. The retained earnings section only has one general ledger account, called retained earnings. Shares of ownership in a corporation are called capital stock. When a corporation is formed and creates its articles of incorporation, also known as a charter, the number of shares of capital stock that can be issued is determined, and how many of each class of stock. Now we get into some very important vocabulary. It's essential that you understand and learn these, because without this knowledge, you won't be able to accurately journalize the transactions you'll see in this chapter and in the next. There's also quite a few quiz questions about these terms. The first is authorized stock. This is the number of shares the company is authorized to sell. The company can't sell more than the authorized number of shares listed in its charter without amending the charter and obtaining permission from the state in which it's incorporated. The second is issued capital stock. Issued capital stock is the number of shares sold. The third the third is outstanding capital stock. This is the number of shares that have been sold and are actually owned by stockholders. You'll learn later that it's possible for a corporation to own its own shares. The corporation is not a stockholder, so any shares the corporation owns are not considered outstanding. In this course, you'll be learning about preferred stock and common stock. Each type has its own general ledger account. Let's go over some of the characteristics of common stock. Stockholders who own common stock have certain types of rights that stockholders who own preferred stock may or may not have. When a corporation has only one type of stock, it is common stock. Common stockholders can vote at stockholders' meetings, share in profits by receiving dividends, dispose of or sell their stock, and have something called preemptive right. Preemptive right means the stockholder can maintain their proportionate ownership interest in the corporation. For example, let's say Jill Evans owns 15% of the common stock of a corporation. The corporation decides to issue more stock. If other people buy the newly issued stock, Jill might no longer have 15%. The corporation would send her a letter telling her she can purchase enough of the new shares to be issued before they're made available to others in order to maintain 15%. She doesn't have to do this, and she will have a time limit to make her decision and her purchase, but she's given the opportunity, which is what's called preemptive right. The final right of common stockholders is that when a company is liquidated, in other words, it goes out of business, common stockholders might receive a share in assets after creditors and others with prior claims are paid off. This doesn't mean there will actually be anything to share. Now let's look at the characteristics of preferred stock in comparison to common stock. The first one is that preferred stockholders have preference to a corporation's profits over common stockholders. This means when a corporation declares dividends, preferred stockholders are paid first. If there's anything left over, it then goes to common stockholders. Preferred stockholders do not get voting rights at stockholders' meetings, nor do they get preemptive right. They don't have as much earnings potential because preferred stock is more difficult to buy and sell than common stock. A benefit to owning preferred stock is that preferred stockholders, since they have preference to earnings, receive more stable earnings. Dividends are what stockholders receive when a corporation distributes its earnings. Dividends must be approved by the board of directors. A common misperception is that corporations are obligated to give stockholders dividends, and they are not. Many companies keep their earnings in order to expand their business. There's 4 important terms used with preferred stock that you need to understand and learn in order to make computations and accurately record transactions involving dividends. The first is cumulative. If preferred stock is cumulative, the stockholders have a right to certain dividends every year. This doesn't mean they actually receive dividends. It just means they have the right. So if the year passes and the corporation did not declare dividends, the amount due to the cumulative preferred stockholders accumulates and it's added to the amount owed the next year. The second, the second is non-cumulative. This means that if the corporation doesn't declare dividends and the non-cumulative preferred stockholders don't receive a dividend, the company doesn't have to pay them in the next year. The third is non-participating. Non-participating preferred stock means the stockholders will receive a certain percentage as a dividend if dividends are declared, and the rest of the total dividends declared by the corporation go to the common stockholders. In other words, the stockholders of non-participating preferred stock do not participate in receiving the additional earnings of the corporation. Participating preferred stock means the participating preferred stockholders not only get a percentage of dividends, but they also get a percentage of the additional earnings. Now let's go over the important terms used when talking about stock and stock value. The term par value is an arbitrary value placed on each share of stock. Arbitrary means it doesn't have any real value. This amount, par value, is printed on each stock certificate. The total number of shares a corporation issues, multiplied by the par value, equals an amount called legal capital. Some stock doesn't have a par value assigned to it. In that case, it's called no par stock. We also have stock with stated value. Stated value is also arbitrary. From an accounting perspective, par value and stated value are treated the same, as you will see when we journalize the transactions. The differences are mostly legal. So that covers Learning Unit 2. In the next Learning Unit, we'll start performing calculations and journalizing transactions.